Good evening, Los Angeles, and welcome again to Los Angeles City Hall, and thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight, I'm joined by our Los Angeles Police Department Police Chief, Michael Moore, and I want to thank him for joining us again tonight and the work that all of the men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department and our public safety agencies across LA County are doing each and every day to protect us. He'll speak a few minutes more about how we can continue to keep Angelenos safe while they are staying at home. But first, let me start on a personal note with a little bit of sad news, because we lost a dear friend of mine, a mentor, my former creative writing teacher, and an environmental giant for the city of Los Angeles. I'm speaking to you in a downtown of a coastal city that's not on the coast. Ironically, that's because it wasn't the water of the ocean, but the water of the Los Angeles River that founded our city. The supply of that water, the birthplace of a river that was named Los Angeles before the city was. And Lewis McAdams, who founded Friends of the Los Angeles River, passed away yesterday. He was a giant, somebody who was a poet, somebody who was a prophet, and somebody who made sure that we resurrected our birthplace, the Los Angeles River. And my heart breaks for him, for his family. He did not die of COVID-19, but I wanted to thank him for who he was and what he gave our city. The work that we'll continue to do along the Los Angeles River will be in your memory, and every single day we will hear your poetry and we'll see you downstream. I'm proud that our city has been at the forefront of the conservation movement ever since we experienced in the 1950s and 60s some of the worst air in America. And typically we would come together today, Earth Day, in fact the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, to celebrate our progress and reaffirm our commitment to combating climate change, to improving our air quality, and to make sure that we have a future that is greener, with jobs in a green economy for everyone. But as we stay safer at home, we obviously can't gather and celebrate as we usually do on this day. So instead, we should consider Earth Day in our changed context, and also think about the connections between our environment and COVID-19. A recent Harvard University study linked air pollution and the risk of death from COVID-19. And that's because many pre-existing conditions that make people more susceptible and vulnerable to dying from this novel coronavirus, like cardiovascular and respiratory troubles, also grow out of long-term exposure to pollution. And that's just one of the many ways that climate change and COVID overlap, how both pose deadly risks that will require all of us to come together to protect our own health and the health of this planet. It's another reason our city must continue to lead on the forefront of not only cleaning up our smog and cleaning our air, but helping our entire planet heal as well. And we know that these impacts disproportionately affect lower income Angelenos, communities of color, our children, and both call on us to fundamentally alter how we live. As I said on Sunday, this is not just about reopening and recovering, but reimagining our city and what we can do better, to see more blue skies like we've seen in recent weeks, to build more public transportation, to have more opportunities for us to be healthy. And looking at our windows, we can see the remarkable impact of the work that we have done to keep ourselves safe and how our Earth has responded. But as we emerge from this blue sky and go back in the future to a new Los Angeles, let us make sure that everything from Los Angeles' Green New Deal to the work that we've done on public transportation and cleaning our air continues as well. Happy Earth Day to everybody, even as we celebrate at home. So let me run through the usual data snapshot of COVID-19 stats that you need to know this evening. Today, the county reported 1,318 new positive COVID-19 cases, bringing the total to 16,435, a 9% increase since yesterday. For comparison, we've seen the past 7 days about 879 new cases a day. And this was another day with a backlog of cases that were added. So the last 3 days, don't get freaked out by a bigger number. It's because there's more testing online and a backlog of cases coming from some of the labs are coming to us today. In the city of Los Angeles, 647 new cases were confirmed, bringing the total to 7,551, a 9.5% increase since yesterday. And today, we learned most tragically of 66 new deaths countywide, bringing the total to 729, the second most deadly day that we have recorded. This is a 10% increase since yesterday. It represents 1.5% of all the deaths in America from COVID-19. But we are a county that accounts for 3% of the nation's population, so we're about half per capita of the nation's average. but today was the second highest number, as I mentioned, since reporting began in March. And every family that got that horrible news and who can't grieve alongside their loved ones, who didn't have the opportunity to hold the member of their family that is now not here, we are with you in your grief tonight. Deaths are doubling every 7 to 8 days, and across the county, though, we still maintain good hospital capacity. In our general emergency hospitals, there are nearly 1,300 beds available, 1,299 to be exact, including 1,053 acute care beds and 246 ICU beds, and 1,143 available ventilators. As we confront this crisis, and as we start to determine when and how we will begin reopening our city in the future, testing continues to be the most critical tool we have. And every day, as I report, we are working to expand our testing capacity, as I describe it, to widen that aperture of how many people can come and get tests and have the information they need and we need to stop this virus. And I was very pleased to hear today Governor Newsom recommend to local governments like ours and places like Los Angeles and the rest of the state that we should begin to test asymptomatic, which is just a fancy way of saying people without symptoms, folks out there in our community, including residents and staff of nursing facilities, which we've done now for a couple weeks that I've shared with you, as well as healthcare workers. Well, Los Angeles has been steadily doing that to people who have both symptoms and those who don't in those high-risk areas, at nursing homes through our LAFD rapid response teams. And over the last 2 days, the team has provided testing to more than 1,000 residents and staff, both with and without symptoms, to make sure, and we've contacted dozens more offering free testing services. And I'm very excited to be able to announce tonight that starting tomorrow, we will make testing available to all critical workers that are on the front lines with or without symptoms. I know members of the press asked yesterday, when can we start testing asymptomatic people? I mentioned that we are doing that in our nursing homes and senior care facilities, but starting tomorrow, healthcare professionals, grocery store workers, first responders, and critical government personnel can get a test even if you don't have symptoms. We wish we could open that up to everybody, but I think we all know that we have firefighters and police officers, doctors, nurses, janitors at hospitals, folks that are in grocery stores and pharmacies that are putting themselves out on the line. And we want to make sure that they are healthy, that they have the peace of mind of knowing they're healthy, and because they interact with so many people, that we can make sure that they're not spreading. So workers should contact their employers on how to get priority testing, but it's a very important milestone on the road reopening, and you can go to coronavirus.lacity.org/testing to sign up at one of the 34 testing sites across LA City and LA County. Today, we had the capacity again to test 12,200 people, and we believe by the end of today, just through these testing centers, we'll have tested approximately 93,000 people. Together with earlier tests through providers and the public health laboratories, we're probably north of 120,000 tests in LA County since we started. Everything we're doing is focused on your safety and on your health, and we can't take our foot off the accelerator now. As you can see, our deaths are still rising here in LA County. I warned last week that even as we saw the rate of increase begin to plateau, we're still increasing, and deaths are a lagging indicator. That means that it will take 2 or 3 weeks to see the peak of our deaths, potentially. So we must keep adhering to emergency measures to ensure that that peak is coming. Otherwise, we'll continue climbing to even higher and higher peaks, more tragedy, more death, more sadness, and that aperture of opening up society will continue to be pretty closed. And I've said repeatedly, if any non-essential businesses continue to operate, they can spread this disease. Their selfishness means every other business can't reopen. It means that more people will get sick and more people will die. So we will act to ensure their compliance with our Safer at Home order. Our business ambassadors, which are our collection of city employees and members of my mayor's crisis response team, have visited now more than 1,700 businesses, including 47 more just today. And almost all respond as we hope, by closing their doors, and Chief Moore will talk a little bit more about that and what happens when they don't. But as a reminder, if you see violations that are out there, businesses that are not yet allowed to be open, please let us know so we can send those ambassadors, educate them, ask them to close, and if necessary, take more extreme steps. coronavirus.lacity.org/business violation is where you can go to let us know what you see in your neighborhood to keep us all safe. And thank you for helping. Some businesses are essential, like those that are making the non-medical grade face coverings, the masks that we are now mandating in the city and the county, and part of the LA Protects manufacturing initiative to get some of our people back to work in critical roles that we need to protect all of us. But we also want to make sure that workers at all of those facilities are safe and that they are being fairly paid by the law. That's why today I launched the LA Protects Business Ambassador Program, where we'll focus on physical distancing at workstations, disinfection protocols, and ensuring that the county's physical distancing protocol is complete. These will be really important not just for the LA Protects program and the masks they're making, but also for looking down the line at how we could reopen manufacturing in other industries and get more people back to work. We need to make it work here first. So ambassadors will document any company they think should be referred to the city's Office of Wages and Standards if they're not abiding by the law, as well as worker safety issues that could be raised with Cal OSHA. And repeat violators will be referred to the police department for further action. Most companies are overwhelmingly doing the right thing, and all of them are helping us out with this manufacturing. But you still have to comply with all existing laws while that is happening. So to tell us a little bit more about enforcement, let me turn it over to Chief Moore. Again, thank him and his women and men of the department that are doing extraordinary work, filling in new roles, protecting us all, seeing a drop in crime, but at the same time making sure that we all feel safe while we're safe at home. Chief Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. And let me take this opportunity now, in more than 4 weeks into this engagement, to thank you for your leadership. Your leadership in not only establishing some of the first testing, but the capacity that you're building to monitor and identify those that are impacted by COVID-19. And now with this addition of allowing first responders who are asymptomatic, I know I have hundreds of men and women that will look forward to that opportunity because of suspicion, of concerns for their welfare, their family, and others. And opening that aperture to allow them access is just it's great for us. It's great for a leader for me to know that. Your work also, though, with the Safer at Home Directive, I'm here tonight to talk to Angelenos. Your work with the crisis response team and disaster service workers, those 1,700 plus instances to non-essential businesses to remind them, they're there basically on a citizen's complaint. When a community member who sees and believes that that location should not be operating, and that disaster service worker, community response team, volunteer has really allowed LAPD to stay focused on our primary mission of enforcement. But it has also allowed us to identify repeat offenders. And in more than 1,500 instances since this program was in its inception, we have found instances, again, where with our added nudge, the business has become compliant. But I hate to say this, but there have been those that refuse to comply and have required enforcement action. And to date, we have had 86 individuals. Now, out of 3,600 plus instances, that's a very small margin. But it's 86 instances of businesses that are jeopardizing not only themselves and their employees, but their customers and everyone else around them. And it really undermines the very essence of why it's safer at home. And I'm proud of the work in concert with City Attorney Fuhrer and his office's involvement. They have now filed 25 of those complaints before court to pursue a criminal prosecution, including a potential substantial fine for that violation. Going forward, with the addition of the monitoring of locations for utility shutoffs, we've made more than 173 visits to date. And in all but one instance, we've been able to, with that last lever, achieve compliance. So all in all, I would just say to the Angelenos and the business owners and operators of non-essential businesses, stay closed. The more you're compliant with that order, the sooner we'll be out of this ordeal. And for those members of the community that believe that they've called and yet they see the business still operating, please call us again. We have resources both day and night. We have volunteers as well as dedicated police resources, and we will respond and we will investigate. And if the location is a repeat offender, we will accelerate and amplify the enforcement efforts. There's two other areas I want to talk about tonight, and this next one is the most important. And that is the instances of domestic violence. And what we're seeing right now with this pandemic and a troubling trend, and one I need all of Angelenos to help us move forward with. Each day across America, more than 20,000 calls are made to a domestic violence hotline. Victims, individuals that are being victimized at home, violently, physical abuse, emotional abuse. We know nationally more than 10 million women suffer physical abuse in this country. And with this, in talking with our domestic violence coordinators and advocates, we've heard that those hotline calls are up by 50%. And yet, what we know this fifth week in this pandemic is that calls to us and reported crimes for domestic violence are down. We're having 10 fewer crime reports each day for instances of domestic violence. That's going in the wrong direction with what we believe is actually occurring behind closed doors. With so many individuals now staying home and not walking outside and moving about the city, we believe that there are increased instances of both domestic violence, whether it be by a family member or even an increased levels of child abuse. What we want all Angelenos to know is that the LAPD is here. We will respond. We will investigate. And we'll hold and bring to justice those responsible for domestic violence. And even as important as that is that we can get victims of domestic violence to a shelter, to safe housing, to locations so that they don't have to be in that home with that abuser. And I'm proud to say that with the generous funding by Rihanna and Jack Dorsey of amount of $4.2 million to the Mayor's Fund of Los Angeles, that we've been able to build and bolster the shelter and safe housing space here in LA County. Typically, prior to the pandemic, the county would have approximately 600 safe housing locations, and generally those locations would be at or near capacity. It's been the generosity of these two individuals as well as the generosity of so many others during this period of crisis and emergency that are coming up, stepping up, and filling critical gaps of what it means to be safe in our region. In closing on domestic violence, I want to say again to advocates and providers and to victims that may be out there is that LAPD stands ready and want to hear from you, and that we will respond and get you help and get you safe. The last issue for my remarks tonight is a matter of looking at the approaching weather. It's getting warmer in Los Angeles. And when it gets warmer in Los Angeles, we are a coastal city, we tend to head to the beach. We tend to head to the trails. We like to be outdoors. And yet, as we know in the non-essential activities, we've needed to close trailheads. We've needed to close the beaches. There's areas of Los Angeles that we're asking people not to congregate, to exercise social distancing so that we can cut down the spread of the COVID-19. And to date, our efforts have been to advise, counsel, and direct. And I have to say the vast majority of Angelenos have been compliant. And they have avoided those congregations. And when they've been approached by officers, they've honored their directions and guidance. As we come upon this weekend and we see the increased temperature and we see other parts of this region opening their spaces, I know that there'll be opportunities for people to think, well, why not here? And let's just go out there. I'm going to ask everyone, though, is to exercise that social contract of our own responsibility and to hold ourselves accountable and avoid those non-essential activities. Take a walk on a sidewalk in a shaded area. Find space by yourself or with your loved one and enjoy that time, but avoid those common areas here in Los Angeles that we like to enjoy living in LA, and save the police the awkwardness of us having to admonish you and advise and direct you for something that you already know. With that, our men and women can stay focused on public safety. We can continue to enjoy a safe Los Angeles. And as important, we can get through this pandemic sooner and on to the restoration and reimagining that we all want. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chief Moore, and thank you again for all the work that you are doing, not just as the Chief of Police, but at our Emergency Operations Center, where you played a lead role in coordinating so much of our efforts. Since this crisis began, we've also been focusing, of course, on our housing situation. Those Angelenos who are hard hit by this crisis, who are worried about paying their rent. In a moment when we're all safer at home, we can't allow anyone to lose their home. That's why early on we enacted our residential and commercial eviction moratorium. The Council, as I speak, is looking at ways to strengthen that and make sure there's no loopholes. We froze rents for all rent-stabilized units and called on the federal government to make sure that rental relief is paired with mortgage assistance for the landlords who own those apartments, who themselves could lose the apartments just as renters are worried about losing their apartment. It's why we've encouraged tenants and landlords to work together, because all of us are making sacrifices. Getting through this emergency requires everybody to be flexible and compassionate. It's why we've also urged renters to recognize your landlords might also be facing financial hardship, so you should let them know in writing. It's very important to do that in writing about your economic circumstances as a result of COVID-19. This is a vital step to protect you, but I know that it's easier for some than for others. So I wanted to let you know a tool that is very simple for you to download and use. Our city's Housing and Community Investment Department is here to help, and we have a sample letter that you can send to your landlord. If you go to hcidla.org, .lacity.org, so that's hcidla.lacity.org, download the document and fill in your information and email it or print it out or send it to your landlord. The template has already been downloaded over 50,000 times. It's available in 7 different languages. And just like our staff has worked with more than 20,000 Angelenos to help them navigate rental issues and offer guidance, I want to highlight a few of those tips tonight. First, make a plan for how and when you'll start paying back your rent. Second, become familiar with the income assistance that's there if you're worried about never being able to pay that rent looking ahead. You can learn more through initiatives like our Housing Department's Fair Housing Month webinar series that's online right now, and other programs that are available on that website. And third, remember that landlords cannot force you to provide documents of lost income or hardship, and you're not required to sign any payment agreements. And finally, remember that the Department of Water and Power has halted any disconnections in the city. So you should not have any disruptions in service during this time, and please let us know if you have. And I want to thank, again, our City Council members, Nuri Martinez, our Council President, Councilmember Herb Wesson, who are working to provide rental subsidies in some of the hardest hit households, alongside Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell, Councilmember Mike Bond, and Councilmember David Bruce, so many, and really the entire Council, who are looking at putting their own discretionary dollars into direct subsidies to help people with food, with rent, and other things, just as we've done as well. We're working together, and our Housing Department staff is investigating tenant complaints, informing landlords about the rules. So again, any questions, any information you need, please go to hcidla.lacity.org. At the top of this briefing, I mentioned that connection between COVID-19 and climate crisis. But there's a common thread I left out earlier, that both crises are global in nature, scope, and impact. Neither respects borders nor boundaries, nor they can be answered by a single state or city or nation alone. And I'm so proud that Los Angeles has always seen that we are strongest when we are opening ourselves to the world. It's why 63% of us are immigrants or the children of immigrants. It's why we have arguably the most diverse set of cultures, not just in the world today, but in human history. It's why we are a trade capital. It's why we are able to send our movies around the world. It's a two-way street that strengthens our economy, our social fabric, and who we are. And I think there's been some wonderful reflections of that as we go through these crises. We've seen consulates and businesses and diasporas, all who call our city home, step up to help Los Angeles. We've received personal protective equipment from across the globe. Thanks to our collaboration with local diplomats, just this week alone, we had 115,000 masks and face coverings, 65,000 gloves, and 54,000 medical face shields headed to local hospitals from the Armenian, Chinese, Japanese, and Taiwanese American communities. And folks here in the city, too, are stepping up, doing amazing things. And I'm pleased to share the news that 2 amazing angels in our City of Angels have stepped up. And I want to thank Shirley and Walter Wang, who have pledged $1 million to the Angeleno Fund. And like I say every night, the more money we get into the Angeleno Fund, the more money we can hand out directly in those debit cards to help people with the basic things that they need, the food, the medicine, and everything they need to get through this tough time. So thank you so much, Shirley and Walter, for your generosity. May God bless you both, and thank you for what you've done. Through all of this, we are showing each other our strengths. As a city government, as a county and region, as a leader in this state, in this nation, and across the globe. And we need to continue to have those international connections, those philanthropic partners. We need collaboration and cooperation. Here we don't demonize immigrants, we embrace them. We often are them. We see that the threat is not somebody from another culture or who speaks a different language. The threat right now is COVID-19, and by pulling together, we will push through this as one. So let's keep it up, and let's continue to stay healthy. Let's continue to stay safe, and let's continue to stay at home. All strength and all love, Los Angeles. God bless you all. And with that, happy to answer questions. Thank you. And questions for the chief, too.
Question comes from Jory Rand from ADC 7. Please
Hey, Jory.
go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, Chief, thanks for taking our questions today. 2 quick ones. I promise they'll be quick. The first is just an update on the streets initiative. How's that going? How much progress has been made? And is it possible to kind of compare where we are now compared to where we would be had everyone still been on the streets? And the second question is about blood plasma donation and the potential to have those who have gotten over the virus already help those who have it right now. The Red Cross put out an update today on donations, and I was just curious if the city has any initiatives or guidelines for those out there to build up the supplies of plasma for those who might wind up needing it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I also want to thank, I know it wasn't the question, but all the folks who have stepped up when we called for people to give blood because hospitals and the Red Cross don't have enough. And you can go to the Red Cross. We've had great folks are asking, how can I help? How can I volunteer? Sometimes it's as simple as giving blood. So I want to thank people with that. With plasma, it's still a little early, and the research is still kind of out. The plasma from folks who may have been exposed to COVID-19, is that something that can make others immune? So we know that there's a number of hospitals, research institutions here, and of course across the country and globe that are looking at that. But right now, we also need blood plasma in general. So that's part of what we hope people can step up and help for our hospitals to have that supply. We're managing this crisis so far, but as we heard from the CDC in the fall, for instance, when we could potentially have a second spike, it could be flu, which can be very deadly, and this at the same time, doubling and overwhelming people. So it's never too early to think about what you can do to give back. Hopefully we'll have more to speak about as the research is more conclusive on the blood plasma donations and what it can do to help us all potentially get back to work, back to school. In terms of the Streets Initiative, let me give you the latest numbers. So 23 total shelters are now online. We had 2 more shelters online today at 5 p.m. They're an average of 95% capacity, over 1,000 beds, 1,024 beds. The hotel rooms right now, Tier 1, which remember are folks that have not yet been infected but are living on the streets or in a shelter and need to get someplace where they can be safe because they're particularly vulnerable. 749 of those rooms are occupied out of 1,175, and these numbers are growing every day in terms of the number of hotel and motel rooms we're getting. The Tier 2 ones, which are for folks who need to be quarantined and who have tested positive, right now we have 79.5% of those. About 300 guests are housed, and we have 361 total rooms there as well. So we're going to continue pushing. The goal is thousands more. We hope that many of the motels and hotels will continue to come in, but as said with those numbers, it's not that we have a backlog of 2,000 or 3,000 people waiting to get in. It's keeping pace with what we expect. And remember, this is not going to be an overnight thing. This is something in which we will have months, especially for those that are vulnerable and still have tested negative, where we have to look at taking care of them and housing them. And I was very pleased that some of the guidance from the federal government came through today, also with the deposit of a very large check that came from the third round, the third piece of legislation, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, that is for things we can get reimbursed for, but almost $700 million that will come in. We were told that that will cover a large percentage of those rooms so that we can continue to accelerate and have people there not just for a couple weeks, but even as some people might go back to work and some people might go back to school in coming weeks and months, we can make sure we're protecting those who are the most vulnerable, people who are over 60 or 65, people who have pre-existing conditions, and as we know, disproportionately, people experiencing homelessness already have those sorts of medical conditions. So this is not going to be a sprint, even though it feels like it right now. It is going to be definitely a marathon, and it's good to know those resources will be in place, and I hope to work with the county to combine those resources we both got to make sure we have thousands of beds available. Thank you, Joy. Next question.
Thank you, and that comes from the line of Mary Beth McDade from KTLA Channel 5 News.
Hey, Mary Beth.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Nice to speak with you again.
You too.
So we've had many people calling in, many viewers calling in, just wanting some clarity on how to get this Angelino card. Where should they go to get the Angelino card? Did they miss out? Are there any more Angelino cards coming down the pike? I know you just mentioned that some kind people just donated more money towards that. So could you just help some of these viewers, clarify about that Angelino card?
Absolutely. So we received about 185,000 households in the end once we took people who didn't live in the area or duplicates out. for what will be between probably 10 and 15,000 cards. We'll see. That's how much money there is right now. So people should have received something already. Those that were selected to come in, they've already started sitting down with our family source centers and some of our great partners in the community to sit down. Some of those cards, hundreds of them already today and every day moving forward. You should only come in if you got the email saying, or a text, or there's other ways that we're calling people if they weren't able to receive a text to let them know that they will be granted those in the first round. We aren't opening up a second round yet because we have so many people and we have all those names there. So hopefully we'll be able to take more people off that list. And I know it's frustrating for those who didn't get through. But, a lot of people said at the beginning, if you can't get everybody who wants this, should you do it? I said, of course we should. If I had 10 of these, I'd give them out. If I had 100 of them, I'd give them out. But now that we're into the thousands and over 10,000, and a household is usually 3 to 5 people, we're going to help somewhere around 50 to 70,000 people in this first round. So I'll have to spend the next couple of weeks raising more money. I always make the appeal each night. Go to mayorsfundla.org. If you can give $1, if you can give $1 million, no matter what you can do, this goes directly to families. There's nothing off the top. It doesn't even come into city coffers. It's done privately so that we can ensure that it goes immediately, and we have the system to make sure there's not fraud, that people can sit down, they have that interview, and then it's easy for them to get something that's a debit card for what they need. So I know there's probably a lot of calls. We get a lot of those too, saying, hey, I didn't get selected. So right now, if you didn't get selected, just hold tight, and hopefully we can continue to raise more. And I'm really glad that the folks who are volunteering, and I want to thank those frontline workers who are doing this amazing work. LAPD has helped us as well. There's been no incidents. It's gone peacefully. People are coming in, and those cards, as we speak, are going out. Today was the first day, and every day moving forward probably for the next week. Thanks, Mary Beth. Next question.
And that comes from line of Alex Michelson from Fox 11 News.
Hey, Alex.
Hi, Mayor. I want to talk a bit more about the weather, which I know the chief talked about. This weekend we're going to have 90-degree temperatures. Usually in that situation, all the people that don't have air conditioning will go to a pool, go to a beach, go to a mall, go to a store, get out of the heat. You're saying you can't do any of that stuff. What do you want people to do other than what the chief suggested, which is to try to find some shade somewhere on a walk?
So it's stay home. If you can find some place in the neighborhood close by and get outside and try to do that, not in the peak hours, but obviously in the morning or the evening. And if we do have triggers that go beyond the normal triggers that we have even in pre-COVID-19 days, we are looking at cooling centers this weekend. So if we see that the projections are, for instance, in the valley or something, that folks who don't have air conditioning, seniors who would be vulnerable to die because of the heat, we will do that, but we'll have to do it with, of course, physical distancing. So we're working really hard with Rec and Parks, looking at what facilities are available and seeing what we can do to make sure that if people don't have any other options, there's a place they can go. You're just going to be sitting there, though. You're not going to necessarily be going out and about. But we really want to reinforce with folks, don't go to the beach. It's still closed. Don't go into a park. These will be actually quite hot places as well. If you go to a park these days, if you're going through a trail which are closed, it would be very, very hot. So stay at home. Do whatever you can to cool down. And if you have no other options and we get over those temperatures, the city will, as we always do, and I'm sure the county and other cities as well, will be looking at cooling centers for our seniors and others who have no other place to go. Thanks. Next question, please.
And that comes from Claudia Pashuda from KNX News Radio.
Hey, Claudia.
Wanted to ask if the testing for asymptomatic people will be expanded to include people who are caring for loved ones at home who are in high-risk groups. And also, the LA Times reported with this big ramp-up in the garment industry to switch over to making masks that a lot of these people are working in sweatshop conditions, getting less than minimum wage, not having proper ventilation and distancing measures in place. So if you could address those issues. And I'm wondering also maybe the chief could say whether they've visited any of these businesses that may not be following the rules. Thank you.
Sure. So I don't know if you caught it during the press conference. I know there's a little bit of a delay, but I announced the launching of the LA Protects Business Ambassador Program specifically for that. We also saw those reports. We wanted to ensure, and I spent a good portion of the press conference today, the briefing, talking about why it was so important that everybody abide by the law. There are laws of what you have to pay people, the physical distancing. So we get those reports, or we hear from media or from workers or from anybody else. We will be visiting those places and ensuring they comply with Cal OSHA that they comply with the order that we have in the city and the county. And so now we have that infrastructure in place. I don't want to take the words out of the chief's mouth, but we just are launching that today. As soon as we found out about this. So I don't believe that there's been any visits yet, but we are prepared. And any businesses that don't abide by it, first we start with the ambassadors. LAPD would come second, and we will ensure that people are abiding by the law, that nobody is cheating any workers, that there are not sweatshops. I've worked for years on this issue, and I have a little bit of skin in the game. My grandfather and great-grandfather, they were both tailors. Great-grandfather was an immigrant. His son made men's suits here in downtown, was a union shop. Treating workers in this industry is absolutely critical to me, as well as saving this industry, and those are not mutually exclusive. So we praise the industry for stepping up and protecting. For those bad actors that aren't abiding by the law when they do it, that is unacceptable, and we will enforce the law. In terms of the testing asymptomatic people, we just opened the aperture pretty wide to a new thing today. So I would love to, not yet. We believe that we have enough tests to be able to now offer all these critical workers, the grocery and pharmacy workers that are doing the critical retail work, our first responders, our medical personnel, and government workers who are on the front lines, that testing for asymptomatic. But stay tuned. Each day, each moment we get more tests, each time we have a new testing center or build capacity, we're adding more. Those priorities are in senior homes, people are experiencing homelessness, and also, as you say, maybe some of the folks who are caring for folks. So that could be one of the next categories, but we're very excited today, after a long wait, to finally move forward with asymptomatic testing for those workers we depend on and who are most at risk. Thanks. Next question.
Thank you. Steve Gregory from KFI News, your line is open.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
For Chief Moore, real quick, and I apologize if you talked about, I missed the first couple minutes of your presentation. How is it going for testing within your department? And one of the things that really kind of caught my attention today was that pretty dramatic standoff on the 91 freeway when you had multiple units out there and multiple officers working within very close quarters in very tactical situations. And I'm wondering how that's impacting operations with respect to the lack of social distancing in those tactical situations. And I just wanted to know on the mayor's side, I just wondered, what businesses would you like to see sort of reopen in a kind of a soft rollout? What kinds of businesses could you foresee opening first, and what would you like to see open first? I mean, first thing I think of is like, I don't know about you, but I desperately need a haircut. You look like you got your haircut. I don't know to know where you get your haircut, because I certainly need one. Thank you.
No, we always get this on social media. I saw Mike Bonin have to show the physical proof that his husband had shaved his head. All I've done is take my razor to my sideburns if they look shorter, but this is either how slowly or how fast it grows, so I haven't had a haircut. But I did finally get my electric shears yesterday, so my wife has watched some videos. If I come back tomorrow and it's messed up, I'm not going to throw under the bus, but it's not, because I've gone to a secret barber shop. And I think for a lot of us, we want to see some of those basic things. That would be a great thing to see open if we could figure out the social distancing for our salons and barber shops. I think there's some basic retail that people need to get back to, getting clothes for their kids, some of the things that we're all ordering via mail order. But we have to look at this two different ways. What is most necessary, that as we've been at home, we need to have a little bit of time to get out and to get open? And what can we make safest? Because just because we need something, if we can't safely open something, we won't do it. And just because we can open something safely, but it might not be the highest need, we may wait a little bit longer. So I think that it's going to be very important. I've talked a lot with Dr. Ferrer, folks like Robert Garcia, the mayor of Long Beach, our second biggest city, and some of my other peer brother and sister mayors, that we want to talk about that right now and figure out some of these things together. Because as we've already seen, when Ventura, Orange County is doing something different from LA, it's very confusing for folks. And I really appreciated what the governor said, that he hopes that there will be movement together. And every community is different, and I respect that. But I think we want to make sure an outbreak that happens in a neighboring county will affect us. It'll come here, and vice versa. If we do the wrong thing, that can kill people in Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura, Orange County, et cetera. But I think some of those basic things that can also help folks stand up will be the ones that would come first. And with that, let me hand it over to the chief, whose hair looks pretty good too, but it's getting longer every day, to talk about the stats for his folks. And I have the LAFD stats if you want to know how many people have tested positive in the fire department too. But Chief?
So in Los Angeles, as of this morning for LAPD, we have 71 of our employees that have tested positive for COVID-19. The makeup of that is about 50 of those individuals are sworn members of the workforce. The remaining 21 are civilians. The combination of workplace issues in the sense that you have our officers that are on the street. You talk about the arrest this afternoon, a lengthy pursuit involving an armed individual, a person believed to be armed, committing a violent crime. When those officers come to that termination and now they're met with taking that person into custody, we have challenges. We have the inability at that point to start donning protective equipment in a sense of masks and gloves and so forth. At times we've got to be careful about the person being armed and whether or not that person poses a deadly risk of threat to us immediately. So the efforts that we have is that in those instances we're reminding officers to watch their safety. Safety in law enforcement is their primary focus each day as they go out and serve a community that wants them in their community. We also are providing them with protective equipment, masks, gloves, goggles, as the situation allows. Certainly most of our encounters in the field are cooperative. We're dealing with maybe a traffic stop or we're talking to a crime victim over a particular, some type of a loss of property or otherwise. And we're practicing social distancing, standing back. We're taking phone calls for reports instead of requiring people to come to the front desk. So we're trying to distance our officers from what is a people business. But there are instances, many instances, in which our officers have to come in contact. In instances in which they believe the person is symptomatic or has tested positive for COVID, our officers are taking precautions in the sense of they're noting and documenting the circumstance. Today, the reason why I started my remarks by thanking Mayor Garcetti for his effort of opening the aperture on testing is we've had a number of officers who've had contacts with suspicious individuals, and they are not symptomatic. And because of a lack of available testing, we've had to prioritize and not give those officers that opportunity for that testing. By the availability of additional testing kits now, we're going to be able to open that up, and I know that that's going to relieve a lot of our men and women who are worried about going home and potentially infecting their family. We lost just 2 weeks ago a young wife of one of our detectives who he was asymptomatic positive with COVID, wasn't aware of it, and his wife came down with the virus, and unfortunately, tragic loss of her life as she was unable to recover from it. So this effort is to monitor, to provide testing immediately. When the mayor established testing centers, he established a lane for police and fire so that we would have dedicated testing each day under suspicious or questionable circumstances, and again, we'll broaden that up. The numbers overall, though, are improving for Los Angeles, for LAPD, in the sense that while we're seeing incrementally ones and twos as far as increases in positive COVID tests, we're a workforce of 13,000. And a week and a half ago, we had more than 200 of our personnel quarantined and at home isolated for fear of them being COVID positive. The vast majority have turned out to be common flu, allergies, and not COVID positive, and they have been able to come back to work. That number this morning is 140 of our personnel that are currently quarantined and isolated. But I'm also happy to say that 24 of the 71 have also come back to work. They've survived this virus, they've fully recovered, and they're back on the front line serving Angelenos. So overall, we're doing okay. I have conversations each week with then Superintendent Beck of Chicago and Commissioner Shea of New York City, both agencies that have suffered loss of life as well as a tremendous much higher percentage of their personnel afflicted by this virus. We're trading tactics and stories and understanding how we're going about very similar work and how we can prevent seeing some of the impact that those agencies have seen. And yet we learn every day about our work and have to try to continue to keep that number. I'd like for us to close this process at 71 positive COVID virus members of this workforce, but unfortunately I know too well that, that our engagement in the field will require otherwise.
Thank you, Chief. And LAFD, our fire department, has 20 cases, 19 sworn, 1 civilian, of which 14 have already returned to duty. Just as Chief said, I think it might even have more recent number, 25 officers have returned to duty. So we're really pleased that those numbers, while they were small, most folks have been able to return to duty and are healthy. And thank you for mentioning, I hadn't said it publicly, but I'll let the Chief have said that, and our heart goes out to the detective who has lost his wife. We spoke, and it's just one of the tragedies of this is all of us can't be together to mourn together, but our heart goes out to him and to his children. Next question, please.
Thank you. That comes from Jin Tak Han from UCLA Daily Bruin. Please go ahead.
Good evening.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
So I have a question about the tax. I would like to ask a clarification on the test expansion. So when you say all essential workers, does that refer to all the essential workers as listed in your original order back in March? And in terms of what happened around City Hall today, there were a lot of couple protests going on, both for and against the stay-at-home orders. Does that affect your decision on whether to end the stay-at-home orders either early or extend it? And to Chief Moore, what are the implications for the LAPD regarding these protests?
So let me start there, and Chief Moore can talk about that, and then I'll come back to the test. No, I mean, I respect deeply everyone's First Amendment rights, and I respect deeply protesters, whether they're protesting for something or against something, and I never don't listen to that. But I have to say, what's guiding me is science, is medicine, is also history and the experience of other cities. I'm just not going to play with people's lives. We are going to look at safe ways, hopefully in the weeks to come, based on the advice from our public health departments and our public health professionals, like Dr. Barbara Ferrer, some of our industry leaders who want to protect their employees, want to protect their people, as they propose with her how we could open up some of those places and spaces. Educational leaders, higher education, our superintendents at school districts, et cetera. That has to be done not just by emotion. It has to be done with our heads and by looking at history, by recognizing that even when you do a good job, like you all have done here in Los Angeles, remember that story I've shared of San Francisco in 1918. Did a great job the first round, saw everything come down, and opened it up and had 5,000 more cases in a month. If we opened everything up, we'd see 95% of this county infected by August 1st, according to the best projection I've seen. That would be tens of thousands of deaths. That would be hospitals overwhelmed. And it would mean the economy shutting down anyway. So for folks who want the economy to get back, we have to keep doing this based on the medical advice. That doesn't mean forever, and I appreciate everybody expressing their frustrations, but even if there's some who are saying open it up, I look also at that polling locally and nationally. People do trust this. People are more scared about opening up too early than too late, and that will continue to guide me. Chief?
So thank you. So what we're seeing, not just here in Los Angeles, but is really occurring regionally and across the country, is protest activity, First Amendment right activity, people expressing their views. They're expressing their views on various things such as the stay-at-home orders or rent control, various aspects of environmental issues, today being Earth Day. I'm sure there's a protest somewhere in our region talking about that. We're a country that is made up of citizenry that gets to exercise democracy in a public place and a public court. And for LAPD, we're going to facilitate that. And I want to say that today's march, or today's car protest, and that's really kind of uniqueness. I think COVID-19, one of the attributes of it will go down is how protest activity moved to the car. And it was not so much marches and banners walking on the street and sidewalk or blocking necessarily curb to curb in assemblies, to which I am very thankful for, because that's keeping the public health in mind, both as an individual and the surrounding community, but they've resorted to staying in cars. And that I'm thankful for. I'm also thankful seeing that those expressions are being in the Civic Center, in downtown commercial areas. Those are good venues for people to demonstrate and for their voices to be heard, for banners and for their honking of their horns or expression through their voices about the protests, about their grievance with government or their grievance with industry, whichever they are. They're being done peacefully. They're not breaking the law in the sense of property damage or violence. And it's not just here in Los Angeles that we're seeing that. We're seeing that regionally and across the country. And to America, I say thank you for that. And we're watching that very closely, because they have, in times of such turmoil and crisis, that can change because of fringe elements that want to come in and try to take that hostage and grab that. So LAPD, we're watching this very closely, and we will continue to facilitate those types of car protests, those types of disturbances, or those types of demonstrations. But let me get into just one attribute that has caused me concern, and that law enforcement, LAPD, that we're acting on. And that is one of the attributes that we've seen in the last 6 months or so. And it wasn't just specific to the COVID-19. was a shift in protest activities to private residences of elected officials and others, and targeting those residences with protests that are not just presence in a banner or walking about on a sidewalk, but are using amplified devices that are assaultive in their voices and the terms and the language that they use, that's intimidating, disruptive, and interfering with the lives of individuals living in their own private space. And there are restrictions to that type of expression. And LAPD will continue to work with organizers who go to those type of locations to ensure that they recognize the limits of their First Amendment rights, and also that if they go beyond those limits, that constitutes civil disobedience, and that there are laws and violations that they can be engaged in. And if they choose to do that, that our effort is to respect that, and that we will act accordingly, and that there will be consequences in the sense of a citation or arrest. But in that entire dialogue, again, it's the expression that we're going to support and facilitate, and our efforts is to keep it lawful, peaceful, without infringing on people's rights. And if it gets in that latter area, then we'll work with the organizers and individuals to warn them, admonish them, but also to hold them accountable, because it is a balancing, if you will, as far as those expressions.
And to your first question, just quickly, because it's a great question, I want to make sure that people aren't confused out there. There's a difference between our essential workers and our permitted workers. The orders do have some permitted workers, people in construction sites, for instance, people who might be the engineers and architects doing critical work around that, other folks who might be in an office setting in areas that are permitted to make sure payroll gets out, taxes are paid, et cetera. Those aren't yet open. This is for essential workers, and I tried to say exactly who those are. Those are our retail workers on the front line. Those are our first responders. Those are our government workers that are working in COVID-19 roles. And those are also the health workers that we see in our hospitals or any health. So those four categories can, without symptoms, get testing as of now. That's the group we all say we want to protect, that we all say thank you for doing this work, but now they can. So anybody in those kind of supply chains, those roles, or those positions. Thanks. Next question, please.
And that comes from David Zonizer from LA Times.
Hey, Dave.
Go ahead.
How you doing?
Hey, so this question is for the police chief, but of course you're both welcome to answer it. Coronavirus has triggered this financial crisis at City Hall, and at the LAPD, it looks like there's going to be a couple thousand civilian employees furloughed for 26 days. So I'm wondering, what will be the impact from these furloughs? And given the recent drop in crime, will the city have a hiring freeze for police officers in the next budget year? And finally, should police officers experience the same reductions as their civilian counterparts at the LAPD? And if not, why not?
Okay, David, I did not hear the last question.
It's whether or not they should have the same sacrifices that other ones do, and if not, why not?
So the mayor's proposed budget, which I clearly understand how difficult a budget it was, given the financial collapse of this city, if you will, by the devastating blow to our revenue, the standing down of this economy because of the necessary elements to be safer at home, has had a devastating impact on the city being able to provide basic services. And I'm pleased and I'm proud of a mayor who supported public safety first. And he delivered a budget that protected police and fire and our most important activities. But yet at the same time, I recognize that every city department cannot be the same size and the same nature that we walked into this pandemic with. We're going to walk out, we have to walk out a different department. And that means how do we change our operations, but it also means a scarcity of resources. And at this proposal at this moment, well, we'll be able to support our sworn staffing levels at where we're at today, which I'm grateful for. Our civilian staff, we will ask for them to take furloughs, 2 days each month and 26 over the course of a year, which amounts to nearly a 10% cut in their wage. And that will have an impact not only on them financially, and I made a message, an internal message today that I'm delivering department-wide in the next 2 days, to talk to them about how I recognize and we recognize as a city how severe of an ask that is. But we also must deal with reality and with the crisis before us. And we must do first things first. And that is provide for a uniformed police force in our streets, a detective workforce that can work and follow up on critical investigations, and a civilian workforce that handles the 911 calls, the jail operations, and other critical functions. And while every member of our organization is critical, There must be some cuts in some places. We will work with the mayor's office, and we look forward to a time with our economy restored and revenue restored, in which we'll be able to restore not just furloughs and back to full staffing, but be able to restore some of these other services and desires. But we are not going to be the same department that enters this pandemic. My commitment to all of us, I met today with the Police Protective League President Craig Lally, and we shared and talked about how do we as a department work with this new budget, and how do we strive to find money, to find revenue, so that we can afford everyone who's on the payroll. And let me close by saying that with this devastation to the degree that we have experienced, I am grateful that we did not see a cutback in the number of employees with layoffs and separations that could have been a consequence. So this is it's a tough budget. It's one of the most devastating ones I've seen in my nearly 40 years of service with this city. But we will weather it. We will get through this, and we'll become a stronger department because of it.
And let me just add to that, Dave, two things. We have less money, and people understand that, which is why we have to make cuts. And while the chief very generously talked about why that was important, if somebody wants somebody to blame, those are my decisions in the budget that I wrote. And I talked with civilian employees who, a couple of them said, we're just so thankful in this environment to be working when less than 50% of Angelenos are, when our unemployment rate is going to go to 20%. I think people understand how extraordinary these times are, which is not at all to lessen what 10% less means to a family. Even officers who aren't getting the furloughs, we did put in this budget, for instance, a reduction of overtime in certain areas. There will be less pay to take home in that combination of your base pay and overtime. So everybody will be making sacrifices. But one sacrifice I was unwilling to make, even in a tough budget year, is to see rapes and murders go unsolved, to allow crimes to go up, to have people out there on the streets not have 911 calls answered, when they are the victims of domestic violence, to not have officers roll out in a crisis like this. So that was just something that is non-negotiable. But it will not be a hiring freeze. We will hire to strength inside our police department. We're going to have to figure out how to do classes in a COVID-19 setting. We want to keep the department at the same level. If you let that dip down, you usually wind up paying more in overtime, and that can be even more expensive than having that level of officers. So we will continue, not just with that, but also look at our firefighters. My God, they are out on the line making transportation, bringing transports of folks with COVID-19. Not many of them are away from their families because they don't want to get them infected. We've seen some of them already across the country lose their lives. So those were two areas that were non-negotiable for me, but to think that there are not cuts in those departments would be a mistake, and I take full responsibility for those difficult decisions. Next question, please.
Thank you, and that comes from Matteo Guidoni from CGTN News. Go ahead.
Hey, Matteo.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I was in Skid Row filming the free testing to homeless people, and I'd like to know, why is it so important to test homeless people for COVID-19? And also, do you consider still possible for the city to avoid the spread of the virus among them?
Absolutely. I was passionate from the beginning about making sure that Angelenos experiencing homelessness didn't become the main victims of COVID-19. And I want to be very clear with everybody out there, while I think we've had amazingly strong numbers so far, all it's going to take is 2-3 weeks of something spreading that we could see an explosion. So I worked very closely with County Public Health on asking them their advice. They said take people off the streets and put them in spaced shelters. We've done that, as I mentioned, for over 1,000 beds already. Second, we worked together with the state and the county, and now with federal dollars, hopefully, that have just come in to have hotels and motel rooms as well. But we need testing on the streets, and I'm proud to report that we've had over 2,500 medical visits to check in on how people on the streets are doing, and those numbers continue to climb every day. It's probably, in fact, higher today. We've done testing with doctors who already treat people who are experiencing homelessness, as well as now experimenting with, can we pop up where there's really dense encampments in places like Skid Row, walk up testing centers. And I'm very proud of those numbers, nearly 300 over the last 3 days, and we're just going to keep doing that. And you know who's staffing that? We have our county public health folks helping us out, but LAFD, firefighters, who again are putting their bodies on the line, who've done this safely, who've done this in a humane way, who are angels to these folks who already are so vulnerable and susceptible. And so we're very pleased that that's happening, and it will continue. And I hope with our senior homes, our tests for folks that are experiencing homelessness, those critical workers, that we can continue to see those areas grow, and our medical workers, of course, too, which are part of the critical workers, to make sure they are safe, because this is not going to be a short battle. No matter how much we open and or close back and forth this city, we've got to steel ourselves for the fact that this will be probably more than a year that we are going to be in this place where life will be different, where we're going to be susceptible, and where we want to try to keep the deaths to the absolute minimum that we can. Thank you. Next questions. I believe they're English-Spanish ones.
Thank you, and that comes from Edith Granero from Univision. Go ahead.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you for taking my
Buenas tardes.
call. I have actually wanted to see if you could answer a question that was already asked in regards to the Angelino card.
Yes.
We've also received a lot of viewers calling into our newsroom who applied for the Angelino card, but they were not selected this time around. Their question is, will there be another opportunity for them, and will they have to reapply?
So I'll say, I think I already said it in English, so I'll go straight to Spanish. Si tú has aplicado por la tarjeta Angelina, no tengo bastante dinero para toda la gente en este primer fase de pero es mi esperanza que en el futuro, con más donaciones, tenemos más dinero y nosotros podemos dar más de estas tarjetas. Es nuestra estimación que más o menos 50,000 personas en más de 10,000 casas recibirá una de estas tarjetas, pero hay más de 180,000 aplicaciones. Pero no es necesario reaplicar en el futuro. Tenemos esta información, tenemos estas personas, en cuando nosotros tenemos más dinero, nosotros podemos selectar en una manera igual a todo, más y más familias. Y si tú tienes dar dinero a este fondo de Mayor's Fund, por favor, da esta noche su donación en mayorsfundla.org, mayorsfundla.org. Pero tengo mucho orgullo de la generosidad de la gente, las fundaciones, las compañías de Los Ángeles que han dado y los individuales, porque es la diferencia por una familia y cada donación ayuda a otra familia. Gracias. Next question, please. Is there another question? Is that it?
Thank you, and now to the line of Gabriel Horta from Telemundo. Please go ahead.
Hola, Gabriel.
Gracias, señor alcalde. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Este fin de semana, sabemos, esperan altas temperaturas. Y muchas personas podrían comenzar a salir a las calles, a los parques, a las playas. ¿La ciudad y la policía podría imponer multa o cuál es la advertencia que piden al público para que no se violen las restricciones sanitarias? Gracias.
Todos nosotros queremos regresar a las playas, a nuestros parques, otros espacios públicos, pero es necesario quedarse en casa. Es el mensaje del jefe de policía. Y cuando nosotros vemos personas en estas áreas, por favor, llámanos, porque cuando todos nosotros pueden quedarse en casa, el día cuando nosotros podemos regresar a estos espacios, regresará más rápidamente. Y desafortunadamente tenemos personas, especialmente cuando el clima es mejor. Nosotros queremos regresar a estos parques, a la playa, a las calles, pero la historia es claro. Cuando las ciudades que tienen éxito con las primeras fases de una batalla contra un virus regresa a la vida normal, desafortunadamente este virus regresará y este virus matará mucha gente. Cuando tenemos el aviso de doctora Ferrer, el Departamento de Salud Pública, nosotros podemos abrir la apertura para más tiendas, más espacios, más escuelas. Y este no es final. Este es un tiempo muy difícil, con mucha tristeza y miedo, pero no es final. Tenemos la oportunidad con nuestras acciones a salvar vidas, a proteger la ciudad y regresar más rápidamente a una vida normal con sus acciones. Gracias. So with that, I'm going to turn to my address in Spanish. I want to thank again Chief Moore for joining us. He may zip out while I'm doing this instead of just standing there, so I appreciate him greatly, and I appreciate all of our government workers. I went by Kaiser Hospital last night at Kaiser Sunset, and I just want to send love to all of our medical personnel, doctors, nurses, the janitors, the techs, everybody. I was able to see 100 plus of them at 8 o'clock with my daughter, and to thank you directly. And I can't get to every hospital, but I know our love continues to go out to each one of you. So with that in español. Muy buenas tardes, Los Ángeles. Hoy es el Día de la Tierra. Estoy orgulloso que nuestra ciudad es un líder en tomar acción para combatir el cambio climático. Les invito a reflexionar sobre cómo están relacionados esta crisis de salud y de nuestro ambiente. Un estudio reciente de Harvard indica que existe una relación entre los niveles de contaminación del aire y la tasa de muerte de COVID-19. En ciudades como la nuestra, que tiene ciertos niveles de contaminación del aire, esperaría tener números más altos de personas hospitalizadas por esto. Aunque hemos avanzado en la lucha contra la contaminación del aire, es importante continuar este trabajo para reducir nuestras emisiones y a proteger nuestra salud pública. Ahora comparto los datos de hoy. Hoy hubieron 1,318 nuevos casos en el condado de Los Ángeles, llegando a un total de 16,435 casos en total. En la ciudad tuvimos 647 nuevos casos, llegando a un total de 7,551. Y hoy fallecieron 66 personas más en el condado. Este es el número 2 de casos más grande en estas semanas pasadas, llegando a un total de 729 angelinos fallecieron. Las muertes están redoblando cada 7 a 8 días y 15 de los fallecidos tenían entre 18 y 65 años. 9 tenían condiciones médicas subyacentes. Esta enfermedad puede matar a quien sea. Y oramos con las familias, cada familia que ha perdido a alguien. Estamos haciendo todo lo posible para apoyar a nuestros hospitales. Empezando mañana, estaremos ofreciendo pruebas también para los trabajadores críticos, aunque no tengan síntomas de COVID-19. Este es buenas noticias. Y gracias al mensaje del gobernador Newsom, porque es tiempo no solamente a dar pruebas a personas con síntomas, pero también estos trabajadores críticos sin síntomas también, incluyendo nuestros primeros socorristas, médicos profesionales, trabajadores de supermercados y farmacias y trabajadores críticos del gobierno. En nuestros hospitales tenemos 1,299 camas disponibles. Entre ellas, 246 están en las unidades de cuidados intensivos y tenemos 1,143 respiradores. Tenemos 34 sitios de pruebas en la ciudad y el condado y tenemos capacidad de hacer pruebas para 12,200 personas al día. Y al final del día hoy, hemos hecho pruebas a más de 93,000 personas en estos sitios. Puede hacer una cita para una prueba en la página coronavirus.lacity.org/testing. Todo lo que hacemos es para protegerlos a todos ustedes. Lo he dicho antes, tomaremos acción contra cualquier empresa no esencial que continúa en operación para que cumpla con la orden más protegido en casa. Nuestros embajadores de empresas han visitado 1,700 empresas y algunas cerraron sus puertos. Gracias. Pero la policía fue a visitar las 1,500 que no cumplieron debidamente con la orden y 86 negocios se refirieron a la oficina del fiscal municipal. Tus acciones pueden matar sus vecinos, sus familias, miembros de su lugar de trabajo. Es muy importante para todo de Los Ángeles a parar sus acciones que puedan tomar la vida de una persona aquí en Los Ángeles. Pueden avisarnos de empresas que están violando la orden en la página coronavirus.lacity.org/business violation. Además, hoy lanzamos el programa Embajadores de Negocios LA Protects, quienes se ocupan de asegurar que los empleados en negocios esenciales estén protegidos y ganando un sueldo justo. Los embajadores se comunicarán con las autoridades necesarias sobre cualquier empresa que piensen debe ser referido a ellos. Para personas con dificultad pagando su renta, el Departamento de Vivienda e Inversión Comunitaria está ofreciendo un documento para ayudarle a comunicarse con el propietario de su vivienda de alquiler por escrito sobre su situación económica para protegerse legalmente. Este documento se encuentra en la página hcidla.lacity.org. Imprímelo y llénalo para dárselo al propietario de su vivienda. Está disponible en 7 idiomas, incluyendo, por supuesto, español. Y aquí les paso otras sugerencias para navegar esta situación. Haga un plan para cuándo y cómo va a poder pagar su renta de nuevo. Aprenda acerca de los recursos para asistencia financiera disponibles. Y recuerda que su propietario no le puede obligar a presentar documentos para comprobar dificultad financiera y no está obligado a firmar acuerdos para pago en este momento. Y finalmente, el Departamento de Agua y Energía ha suspendido desconexiones de servicio durante este tiempo. Y yo sé también, y es difícil por los propietarios, y es mi mensaje a Washington, ayuda a los inquilinos y los propietarios. Los dos necesitan ayuda. Este es una crisis de todos nosotros. Y gracias al Consejo Municipal por ofrecer subsidios para la renta para nuestros hogares más afectados, permitiéndoles pagar una parte de su renta. Estamos todos en esto juntos, ayudándonos el uno al otro. Entonces, quédense en buena salud, quédense en casa, quédense protegidos y gracias por todas sus acciones. Fuerza y amor, Los Ángeles, y hasta mañana. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Stay safe.